"Prepare ye the way of the Lord." That's what her preacher had said. That's what she was trying to do this season. She desperately wanted to prepare her heart to receive the peace of Christ. God knew she could use some peace. Carole was a single mom trying to raise 2 kids. Her husband bailed after the second child was born prematurely and had some developmental problems. The doctors couldn't guarantee she'd turn out to be normal, and Carole's husband couldn't handle it. Ironically, our youngest did turn out to be just fine, a happy 11-year-old with a B average and an addiction to instant messaging on the computer because her mother wouldn't buy her a cell phone on which to text. Carole used to love Christmas. Her father once told her that Christmas carols were sung just for her. And years after she stopped believing him, she loved pretending that it was true. She knew the words to all of them. But this year, she didn't feel much like singing. There was a store that she walked by on the way to work every day that had a window full of nativity scenes. There was one she always paused to look at. It was too expensive for her to purchase, and she wondered if it might still be there and go on sale after Christmas. Then she always felt a little guilty, waiting for a bargain Jesus. It was the kind of nativity scene that only had Mary and Joseph and the baby Jesus. None of the shepherds or wise men or barn animals, just the family. The baby is sleeping, and Mary is looking down at him, her very face the picture of calm and peace. Working full-time, trying to raise 2 precocious girls who were determined to grow up as quickly as they possibly could, didn't bring a lot of peace to Carole. She was hoping to find some this Christmas. This year she was really wanting something more from Christmas. Her life wasn't bad, but things just hadn't turned out the way she thought they would. Life seemed a little hollow, as if there was something deep in her core that needed to be filled. She was hoping and praying that Christmas would bring her what she yearned for this year. She wanted to prepare the way for the Lord, but honestly, she couldn't find the time. She got up early enough for a short power walk to preserve both her waistline and her sanity. Then it was always chaos for 3 females to get ready and out the door by 8 a.m. Her workday sailed by with lunch usually being a sandwich at her desk. And then, by the time she got home, fixed dinner, helped with homework, got the girls to bed, and threw a load of whites in the laundry. All she wanted to do was collapse in a heap. She didn't even have time to pray. When on earth did this preacher, who didn't have any children himself, think she was going to do all this preparation? But every day, when she passed by that store, she paused to look at that nativity scene. It was her very own Christmas story. She imagined that silent night when Christ was born. She imagined how miraculous that night must have been and how she longed for the peace she saw in Mary's eyes. One day, as she was passing the storefront to look at her nativity scene, she was shocked and disappointed to see that it was gone. Guess she wouldn't be buying it on the after-Christmas sales after all. But in its place was a very different kind of scene. This one had the shepherds and the sheep and a donkey and a cow and even the 3 wise men. Baby Jesus was not asleep, but his feet and arms were waving in the air, and Joseph leaned over as if speaking to Mary, whose head was thrown back, like she was laughing. What on earth is she laughing about, thought Carole. Then it hit her. Mary was laughing at the absurdity of it all. 2 people far away from home, birthing their first child. A child they had on very good authority was actually God. Birthing him in a barn among the livestock. One would either have to laugh or cry, and this Mary had chosen to laugh. Then Carole suddenly realized there was nothing silent about that night. It was loud and dirty and uncomfortable and painful and chaotic. Nobody was at all prepared for Jesus that first Christmas, and he came anyway. He burst onto the scene screaming and messy and hungry. Carole's hectic schedule seemed like a cakewalk compared to what must have gone on in Bethlehem in that barn that first Christmas night. If Jesus could enter the world in such an unexpected and unlikely way, surely he could make his way into her wacky world. And she had her own epiphany right there in front of the Hallmark store. That year, to prepare for Advent, Carole decided to become the Laughing Mary. When the work package that absolutely positively had to get there overnight went to Tucson instead of Boston, she ran damage control and then she tossed back her head and laughed. When she fell into bitter moods over being left to raise 2 daughters alone, she smiled. Because she and she alone knew the joy of being a parent to those 2 wonderful creatures she had the privilege of calling daughters. When the disposal in the dishwasher broke on the same day, she laughed because it couldn't possibly get any worse. And the next day when the dryer broke, she laughed at her own naivete. When she heard her 2 daughters unpacking the Christmas decorations, and the youngest cried out, "Mom, Sarah hid the baby Jesus. Tell her she can't have him. Jesus is for all of us." Carole laughed because she knew that truer words had never been spoken. And then, in the midst of all that laughter, a funny thing happened. Not funny, ha-ha, but funny, odd, funny, wonderful. Somehow, the morning seemed easier, and she didn't feel exhausted by nightfall. There was not only time to pray, but the prayers seemed to bubble up from inside of her. They came with no effort at all. And there was no part of her body, her soul, or her life that seemed hollow. Several years ago, she had let each of the girls choose their favorite food to have for Christmas dinner. So that Christmas Eve, after church, when she and her girls sat down to their traditional dinner of pizza and Cheetos, every part of her felt whole. Her life was loud, messy, uncomfortable, painful, and chaotic. She was totally prepared for the coming of the Christ child. After all, her life was just the kind of place where Jesus feels at home.